Thank you for joining us. We'll be starting shortly.
Good morning to all our valued Candy users and a very warm welcome to Day 3 of 2021 Candy Virtual User Seminar. Over the course of this week's seminar, we've helped you to get the most out of your Candy solution with specific focus on estimating, which was covered on Tuesday, planning best practices yesterday, and today Mr. Marnus Janse van Rensburg will show you the power of Candy Post Tender best practices. Marnus, take it away.
Thank you, Kabelu. I will then be taking you through best practices for post-tender project control. When setting up a job for valuation number 1, in our training, normally we recommend that you go through a detailed checklist to make sure that the job is in a good condition to use for post-tender use in Candy. This checklist then, listed on screen at the moment. Due to time, I'm only going to do the items that has been underlined and in bold. So I'm going to copy the job, do the initial valuation setup, copy the selling rates, copy the final quantities, clear the client's P's and G's worksheet, copy the indirects to the main bill, and mark the indirects as internal items. So let's go into Candy. Firstly, we copy the job. So I'm going to select the job that my estimator did, Digital Twin Office Park Fully Priced. And I'm then going to, after duplicating it, I'm going to use my control right arrow key to move it down to my post tender header. I will then right click on it and select rename. I will then rename this to Digital Twin Office Park Valuation number 1. Click on OK. I'll then double click to access that job, go to valuations, click on main, and that will give me the initial valuation setup. I'll then select my current quantity date, which is going to be my first claim date. So that will be January, the last working day, 29 January 2021. And the valuation title will then be valuation number 1. Click on OK, and that will then set up my first valuation. The reason why we do that is we would like to have an electronic copy of the job of each condition that it was in. So therefore, if we need to refer back to the estimate or the tender job, we can go back and refer to it. If we need to refer to valuation 1, we can go back and refer to it. If we need to valuation 2, etc. So you have an electronic copy of the Candy job as a backup for in case you need to access information in there again. Next, we're going to copy our final quantities. So for that, I'm going to open up my valuation document. And I'm going to go to the final quantity column. And you'll notice it's blank at the moment. So I'll right click on the final quantity column, copy from selected quantity, select my bull quantity, green tick, confirm yes, click on OK. And you'll notice now I have final quantities. The reason why we do this is in Candy valuations, we focus on final quantities. We use the final quantities to calculate your remaining quantity. So it's very important to have final quantities in place. Now, due to time, we do not have the time to use our construction drawings to measure our estimated final quantities. So what we do is we copy the bull quantity that was used at tender stage as a baseline for our final quantities. Then as you progress and you measure and you notice that some quantities are more and some are less, so as you work towards a final account for this project, you can then update your final quantities accordingly. So that is then the copying of the final quantities. Next, we're going to copy the selling rates. Now, before I do that, I just would like to explain to you what the selling rates are and how they are utilized. So understanding the net versus gross versus selling rate. So at tender stage, we say net rate plus applied markup gives you a gross rate. Now, this is ideal for tender stage because simply what it does is if we apply 10% markup to the job, we'll say 10 plus 10% will give you 11, and that's what we're going to be charging the client. Or 9 plus 10% equals 990. 12 plus 10% will give you 1320. So therefore, the gross rate is calculated, and any changes made to the net rate or the markup will change the gross rate. Now, the gross rate, as I mentioned, is ideal for tender stage, as if you make any changes in your worksheets, you adjust any of your net rates, the gross rate will automatically be updated, and you can then use that to send to your client. However, at post-tender stage, we would not like that anymore. And that is why post-tender, we bring in the selling rate, where Candy says your selling minus net rate is your calculated markup. So what we do is we copy your gross rates into the selling rate column when you do the initial valuation setup. And then we would just say 11, which is what we're charging the client. This is now contractual rates, so that 11 can't change. Minus 10, which is your net rate, is then what we get our 10% markup from. And the nice thing then is we can go and play around with our worksheets. So the site team might say we can do better buying, we can do better production, and therefore this item is only going to cost us 9 per square to do, for example. So 11 minus 9 means that you're making 22.22% profit on this item now. Therefore, you are managing the project using Candy and utilizing it to make additional money, etc. However, in construction, this could also happen where the site team tells you that there's no way we can do it at the allowed rate. It's going to cost us 12 per square to do, and therefore 11, which is your contractual rate that can't change, minus 12 gives you -1, and that means then you are losing money. Now, the selling rates is locked. Any changes made to the net rate will not change the selling rate, and then the difference between the net rate and the selling rate will be your calculated markup. Now, the nice thing about utilizing Candy for post-tender use is if you have an item like that last one where you're losing money, Candy can be utilized to identify problem areas like that on your project, and you can make sure that you manage this project and try and minimize the effects that loss has on you then. Okay, so let's go and copy our selling rates. So to do that, I'm going to click on my document manager and I'm going to open up my selling bill of quantities. On my selling bill of quantities, then I'm going to right click on my selling rate, copy selling rates from gross and click on OK. And there I have my selling rates now in place. The selling rates then are locked. I can't change them. If I right click on my selling rates and I go lock/unlock, I can unlock them and make a change if there's any agreement between the client and myself maybe, and we agree that we can make changes. I can then go and unlock it, but there's a bit of work done that needs to go behind it. You can't just by accident update the selling rate. You can then also go and lock it afterwards again. That is then the copying of the selling rates. Next, I'm going to copy my indirects bill to my main bill, and I'm going to clear my indirects worksheet. So I'm going to clear the worksheet first. So what I'll do is I'll right click on my bill pricing, filter pricing, and I'm going to look for provisional rates. That will then find the item that my estimator used to price our P's and G's, preparation and execution of the works. I'll then double click on the net rate and delete that worksheet and store it. And then the worksheet will now be 0. The selling rate will still be there, which means that I can claim against this item, against that selling rate to my client, but the allowable will now be cleared. And I'm going to explain to you why in a little bit. So I'm going to abandon this filter. I'm going to go to estimating and open my indirects bill. And there is then the indirects bill that the estimator used to price that item that I just cleared the worksheet for. So what I'll do is I'll click on tools, copy indirects to bill page, confirm yes, click on OK, go back to valuations and go to my last page of my bill. And you'll then notice that all these indirect items have now been added to my bill. These net rates then will generate the allowable that I just cleared from that worksheet. And I can then use this as a more accurate way of progressing my indirects for my cost reporting purposes. Now, currently, these items will be seen by the client, and you obviously don't want the client to see what your P's and G's consists of. So what I'll do is I will select all these items, right click on them, go to attributes, internal item, set as internal item. You'll notice in the attributes column now they have a little I, which means they've been marked as internal. So now I can exclude them from reports that goes to my client. Also very important, the internal items then don't have selling rates because you're not going to claim against these items to the client. They only have net rates, where the P's and G item that I just cleared the worksheet for won't have a net rate, it will only have a selling rate. So now I've cleared my P's and G's worksheets, I've copied my indirects bill to the main bill, and I've marked the items as internal. So that is then the steps that I was going to do for the post-tender checklist. Next, we're going to just print some reports. So as the QS is going to run this project on site, I need to just familiarize myself with this job. So what I'll do is I'll click on the printer, and I have a standard set of reports that I normally use. So I'm going to click on tools, and I'm going to go and recover those reports. And after recovering those reports, then I have them in my report manager. The first report then I'm going to print is the value analysis 80/20. This report will then print all my high value bill items. So my price code K00197 walls is 16.09% of my total project cost. So as the QS, I would like to identify my high value items. So all these price codes cumulatively is 82.36% of my total project cost. So I can then identify the high value items, and I can make sure that they are managed properly to ensure that this project is profitable. I'm going to close this report. The next report I'm going to look at is my resource percentage identifying key resources. Preview that. That will then show my resources according to their resource types. All the high value items, I can then go and identify, for example, my basic labor is 55.53% of my labor type, and 18.17% of my total project cost. I can do the same for my material resources. I can see what is my high value material items, and I can then go and ensure that we buy them at the correct rates. Maybe we can get a bit of bulk discount on some of those material items, and I can then use this reports to manage my project. Then we're going to do a review. We're going to do a pricing check, and we're going to check for any plug and split rates. So as the QS running the project on site, I would need to ensure that there's no plug and split rates in this job, so that I ensure I'm using Candy to its full potential. You'll notice then on this report, it just identifies all the unpriced items, which is unpriced price codes that we are not using in the bill. So I don't need to worry about that. There's no plug and split rates, so I can close this report. And then the last report I'm going to print is my trade totals display based on my final quantities, including my direct and indirect costs. I can then see my total project cost there with my P's and G's, etc. included. I can also do it on my indirect costs only, then I'll see only my indirects and what my indirects consists of, or I can do it on my direct bill costs items only. I can then also on the trade totals display view the little pie chart that will show me my percentages. What is 6% is my brickwork, 7% is my concrete, etc. I can also on my resource type see 43% is my P's and G's, 24% is labor, etc. So that's also very nice reports that you can print in Candy. Okay, next we're going to look at QTO Post Tender. So QTO is Candy's very own on-screen quantity takeoff system that can then be used to measure your bill, or if you're running a project on site, it can be used to measure your progress measurements for this project. So to access QTO, in valuations, you'll go to QTO Manager, and in estimating, you'll go to QTO Manager. So in valuations, I'm going to go to my QTO Manager. The QTO Manager is then where you will structure your measurements. So this is where the information from QTO will be transferred to Candy. There's no right or wrong way of organizing this. You simply just need to keep in mind that this is how the information gets transferred. So for example, you could create for area control, you could create a QTO package for block A and block B. You could create a package for each trade, or you could simply create one package for progress measures and do all your measurements in that. So in this example, I'm going to rename this QTO package to block A, and I will then double click on block A to launch QTO. So even though QTO is part of your Candy monthly rental, so you don't need a separate license to utilize QTO, QTO still needs to be downloaded and installed as a separate software package. So you can download it from www.ccsqto.com. On the QTO website, you can then download the QTO install file. And then if you have a licensed Candy system, you would have access to QTO. So you don't need to buy an additional software or pay for more licenses to access QTO. QTO is part of your Candy software. It's just installed separately. All right, so now that QTO has launched, I can take you through the QTO interface. So firstly, at the top, it will show you the QTO package that you're in. It will also show you the version number on that side. Then you have your QTO ribbon. The first ribbon then is your takeoff tab. Then you have settings, layout, and support. Under takeoff, you've got measurement. That will open up your Candy bill of quantities in a read-only format. So this is only for linking measurements to your QTO package. You also have your proposed bill, proposed actual, proposed claimed, and proposed final quantity. So any changes that needs to be made in this bill needs to be made in Candy, and then your QTO bill just needs to be updated. So this is read only. You can't make any changes here. Then you have your drawing list. This is then where you would attach all your drawings. If you click on attach to attach drawings, or you can right click on your drawing list and select attach. I will then go to my digital twin office park, and I'm going to attach my ground floor drawing, and there we have the drawing attached. To open up the drawing, you'll click on this bookie. It will then give you the unit settings. The unit settings will only be asked for the very first drawing that you open for the QTO package. So after attaching the first drawing, you can't change the unit settings. So I'm going to select metric, click on OK, and that will then launch QTO. There's no limit to how many drawings you can attach to a QTO package. Just remember the location of where the drawing is saved is used to link it to the package. We don't copy the drawing into the QTO package. So if you go and move your drawings, you're going to break the link between QTO and the drawing, and then you're going to have to relink it. So I normally recommend that you put all your drawings for the project in one folder and do not move them until you are done with the project. Then we have our folders. So folders is used to organize your measurements. They also create various layers on your drawings. So if your folders external works is active, all the measurements in superstructure won't be visible. So I'm just going to create a folder here called external works. And I'm going to create a folder called superstructure. Okay, then I have my views. So views is simply if you would like to save a specific zoomed in view of your drawing as a view set, you can then quickly access that. So I'm going to right click and add a view set, and I'm then going to zoom into the lift area over here, and I will then right click on this view set, select recapture. That will then capture the view set. If I go somewhere else on the drawing and I work and I want to go back to my lifts, I can just right click and click on open, and that will then take me back to that view over there. Then we have templates. So templates is used for repetitive measurements. So what you would do is you would create a template for brickwork, for example. You would then link brickwork to all the relevant bill items that you would like to measure using that one template. And then on every floor where you measure brickwork, you will simply just drag that template onto the drawing, and then you would measure it. Then we have takeoff list. So the takeoff list button will be grayed out if you don't have a drawing open. So it's only available when you have a drawing open, and that will show you the takeoff list for the current drawing that you have open. So this is then currently in my external works folder. If I click on the drop down, I can switch to the superstructure folder as well. And then if I had another drawing open, I could switch to that drawing's takeoff list. Then we have manager, that will open up your QTO report manager. And lastly, we have compare, which is a tool that you can use to compare drawing revisions. So to use that, I'll click on compare. It's then going to ask me for the first PDF. I'll then select my PDF. I will go to my revisions, and I'm going to select revision A. I'll then select my second PDF, and I'll select revision B, and then I'll click on compare. QTO will then open up a tab where it overlays those drawings. The red is my first PDF, blue is my second PDF. I can then see what changes has been made. I can then save this comparison as a separate PDF file and come and attach it to QTO, and I can then do measurements from this comparison, or I can just save it as a reference to see what has been changed. Then we have settings. Under settings, I have my quantity type. So currently I'm going to measure actual quantity. So I have actual quantity selected. If I was measuring ball, claimed, or final, I could have selected any one of those. Then I have my render type. This is mostly for DWG drawings, where you can select how QTO renders the image. Your decimal spaces, if you would like to view different numbers of decimals, you can select it there. Then we have Navisworks. So for QTO to do 3D takeoffs, you need to have a Navisworks Manage or Navisworks Simulate license, which is an Autodesk product that you would need to buy separately. Then if you have Navisworks, you could use the Navisworks button to identify what version of Navisworks QTO should use for 3D rendering, and then you could just select that version of Navisworks. Then we have transparency. If you turn your transparency on, all your measurements will be a bit transparent, and only the measurement that you have selected at the moment will be clearly visible. If you don't like it, you can just switch it off. Then we have mouse sensitivity. So on your drawing, if you roll your mouse wheel in, you will zoom in. If you roll your mouse wheel out, you'll zoom out. If you press your mouse wheel down, that will then pan your drawing. So it will activate the pan tool and you can move your drawing around. If your mouse sensitivity is a bit too high or low and it's being frustrating, then you can use your mouse sensitivity tool there to set it higher or lower. Then we have layout. Now you might have noticed when QTO loaded on my machine for the first time, all the tabs was open already. That is because I have my layout saved. So what happens is if I click on reset, that will reset QTO to the layout that it had when it was originally installed. If I then customize that, maybe move my bull to have my measurement bull at the top with the other tabs there as I like it, and I click on save, this will be saved as my default layout. If I click on restore, it will restore to my default. If I click on reset, it will reset to QTO's default again. So if you have saved a layout, every time QTO opens up, it will open up with that layout. So that is then the layouts. Then we have support. Under support, you can check for updates. You can extend your QTO version. So if your QTO version has expired, you could call us and the support staff will use the extend tool to extend your version until you can get to internet or your IT department to update it. Then you've got send. So send will send your logs to the RIB-CCS developers to have a look. If you've got any errors in the system, we'll ask you to click on send, and then we can go and investigate why that happened. Then we have ask for help. That will open up a dialogue where you can type us a message and we can then get back to you if you do not like to call us. And then we've got check for errors. So this will check for any calculation errors on your takeoff sheets. For example, you have a variable thickness that is spelled with an uppercase T, and in the worksheet you used it with a lowercase t. The system will then go and check for any errors like that, if they might have slipped through, but the takeoff sheet actually won't allow you to close the takeoff sheet if you have any errors like that. So it shouldn't happen that commonly that you would have to use this tool. So now we're going to go to the measurement tools and the drawing tools. So to explain that, I'm just going to start off with the measurement tools. So the measurement tools, the first one is the calibrate tool. So this is a computer and not a scale ruler. So you would have to give it a scale somehow. So to do that, you'll click on the calibrate tool and you'll say start, and you then select where a measurement starts and where it ends. And that is 6,200 millimeters. I'll end the template, the calibrate tool. If I go back to my drawing list, you'll see the drawing has a little tick there now to show that it's calibrated. So that is then how you set the scale for this drawing. It's very important that you note you can only have one scale. So if a drawing has multiple scale, you would have to go and copy that PDF file, attach the second PDF, and scale that second PDF to the other scale. Otherwise, all your measurements that you do on the one scale will be out of proportion when you recalibrate to the other scale, as we can only have one scale per drawing. Then we have the count tool. So the count tool will be used to count items like doors and windows. Then we've got the length tool that you can use for any linear measurements like walls, etc. Then we've got the line segment tool. So all that will do is on your PDF, so this tool won't work on images, for example, depending on the quality of your drawing. On your PDF, for example, if I click on the segment tool and I go to that wall there, it will pick up where it starts and ends, and I can just click once to measure it. So it's just a different way of doing linear measurements. Then we have the area tool. So the area tool will be used to measure areas. Nice thing is the perimeter is also captured, so you can use that for different measurements. Then we have the area selector tool. So that would work for rooms that have normal shapes. You could then click on where this room starts and where it ends, and that will measure the area. So again, that's just a different way of measuring areas. Then we've got the arch tool that's used for circular measurements. Then we have the ruler tool. So the ruler tool would maybe be if your site team wants to know what's the distance between this column and that column, we can then click on the ruler tool, click where that column starts and where that one starts, and then down here at the bottom of my screen, you would then see it's 7.67 meters. If I right click, that measurements get copied to my clipboard and I can then use it to do different measurements. Then I'm just going to detach my drawing to explain to you the drawing tools, because otherwise I can't see all of them. So the first drawing tool is the snapping tool. So if I take my line tool and I click, for example, where this measurement on this wall would start, I have that little X. The system will automatically follow this line on the PDF. So even though my crosser is over there, my measurement is on that line. And we call that geometric points. So this is to make your measurements a bit more accurate. But if you would like to go here, for example, I can turn my snapping off using that tick, and then you'll see my line will follow me in any direction. Then I have the align tool. So the realign tool will be used if you get a drawing revision and your takeoffs that you've done thus far hasn't been aligned with the new revision. You will then use the realign tool to realign them. Then you've got your select tool. So the select tool, mostly your left click will always be the select tool. But if you're struggling to select an item, you can click on the select tool to make it a bit more accurate. Then we have the rectangular zoom. So if you select that and you select the rectangular area, it will zoom into that. We've got reset zoom, zoom in, zoom out. Your plus key on your keyboard will do the same, and your minus key on your keyboard will also do the same. And as I already mentioned, your mouse wheel will also zoom in and out. Then we have the plot drawing. So if you press your mouse wheel down, the plot tool will always be active once you press your mouse wheel down. If you don't have a mouse wheel or you don't like using the mouse wheel, you can click on the pan tool, and the pan tool will then allow you to move the drawing around, and until you right click, then it will be returned back to the select crosser button. Then you've got the plot drawing tool that will print your current drawing with the takeoff colored in on that. I'll show you that when I do the reports. Then we have rotate clockwise and anti-clockwise. That will just rotate your drawing. Then you've got markup rotation. So maybe if you've done some takeoff and you've got a revision of the drawing and they shifted the drawing, you can then use the markup rotation to rotate your markup. Then we have the drawing layers. So if your PDF or DWG has layers on this button, you could then switch them on or off. This PDF unfortunately doesn't have layers. And then lastly, you've got your text annotation tool if you want to make any text notes on the drawing. Right, I'm going to just reattach my drawing back in there. And we will then now do some measurements. So I'm just going to do a simple area measurement, and I'm going to call this clear site. And I'll click on start, and I'm simply going to measure around my building for my clear site. Now, if I put a point down there, for example, and I made a mistake, what I can do is I can press the escape key on my keyboard, and that will remove the last grip point that I put down. If I press escape again, it will remove them, and I can go back to the very beginning. I will then again just click around my building. Once I get to the last point, you'll notice down here it shows you the perimeter and the area you've measured. Once I get to the last point, I'll right click, and that will then end the measurement. If I go to my takeoff list, there's my clear site then. If I switch to my superstructure folder, my clear site won't be visible. If I go back to my external works folder, my clear site will be visible. Next, I'm going to link this measurement to a candy bill item. So to do that, I can either right click on the measurement to open the takeoff sheet, edit it, continue it, to add to it, insert, delete a point or delete, or I can go to my takeoff list and click on the little bookie next to the item, and that will open the takeoff sheet. On the takeoff sheet, I have my variables. So the variables you would use if you would need to convert the area to a cube value, for example, you would create a variable called thickness, or any other variables you might require. Then I have my takeoff detail linked to the BOQ, and the very top I have the dimensions, which has the area, the number, which is the number of points I put down, and the perimeter. that I can then use. There's no limit to how many bill items you can link to one measurement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this drop down. That will open up my Candy bill of quantities. I can then either go and search for the item manually, or I can type in the text box. I can type the words dig, and then I have there digging up and remove everything there for my clear sight. I would then take the area measurement, drag and drop that into a formula column, and that item will then be measured. So if I go to my measurement bill, where my earthwork starts, you'll notice then I have a proposed actual quantity for that item. Okay, so due to time, I'm going to close this QTO package and I'm going to go into another Candy job, and I'm going to open up a QTO package here. So this QTO package then has a bit more measurements in it, and I'm going to now show you how to transfer this measurements to Candy. So first I'm going to click on my document manager in Candy. I'm going to open up number 2, and I'm going to open up 2.7 QTO bill of quantities. If I then go to that item that I just measured, my clear sight item, you'll notice that there's no measurements at the moment in here. So the quantity refers to the QTO quantity. The type refers to the QTO quantity type, whether it's bill, final, actual quantity, etc. Then it refers to the QTO package code. The drawing, the reference will be the folder and the measurement name, and the time and date will be the time and date that this transfer has been done. So let's go and have a look in QTO then. This drawing has been calibrated. That's all I've measured from so far. I have more drawings attached here. So I'll open up this drawing. There's my measurement. So before I then need to transfer, I'll go to my measurement bill in QTO, and you'll notice that on page 4 or page 5, where my earthwork starts, I have a bit more measurements that have been done in this job there. So in Candy then, I'll go to my QTO manager, right click on my QTO package and select transfer the quantities of this package to the BOQ. And then if I click on my QTO bill of quantities that's in the background, you will then notice that all those quantities have been transferred, and all the other columns that I just explained has been populated. What I would then do is I would select my QTO quantity column just to ensure that I don't update any items that don't have QTO measurements, override them with a 0. So I will click on filter, and I'll then say I would look for values that is greater than 0, green tick, hide rejects. That will only then show my items that have QTO measurements over there. So even though I define this as actual quantity, Candy will never copy this into your to-date actual quantity column automatically. And the primary reason is you might have items that you have manually typed in actual quantities for, and we would then override them with a 0 because they don't have QTO quantities. The other reason is you might use this for something totally different. So it's still up to you where to transfer it for, but you don't need to manually type it. It doesn't have that limitation. You need to simply shift select your items that you've measured in QTO, and then right click and select copy from selected quantity. Select your QTO actual quantity, green tick, confirm yes, click on OK, abandon the filter, and then all your items will be updated. So this is then how you'll use QTO to do your progress measures. Next, I'm just going to show you how you would progress your P&Gs items. So first, I'm going to go to my client P&Gs. So I'm going to filter again for that provisional rate. So this is the item I'm claiming to my client. So items that you claim to your client will not have actual quantity, because actual quantity is what we've actually done. It will only have claimed quantity. So of that selling rate, I would like to claim 20% for this month. So I'm going to type in there 0.2. I'll then abandon this filter, and I will then go to my indirects items that's at the end of my bill, and I would then in my to date actual quantity, I would then progress this to generate the allowable for my P's and G's, which I'm going to use in cost reports in the next chapter. So my site agent has been on site 1 month, so I'll fill in there 1 month. My QS has been on site for 1 month, and I would then simply go and progress these items accordingly. All right, so that is then how you would do your valuations in Candy using QTO, etc. Next, I'm just going to show you some reports. So for the reports, I'm going to start on QTO. So in QTO, I'll click on the manager, and then the first report I'm going to print is my takeoff measurement folders. So I can select what folder I would like to print, click on preview, and what the system will then do is it's simply going to print all the measurements that is in that folder. I can then see the bill items linked to it. I can see the color of the measurement, the result, the area, the perimeter, etc. So that's one nice report. The second report then is per drawing. So I would select my drawing, click on preview, and that will then print all the measurements that's on that specific drawing. And then the bill of quantities, I can, for example, say I want to print measured only actual quantity preview. That will then print all the actual quantities next to the relevant bill items. Then what is also nice, this report can be broken down into a tabular format. If I preview that, this is then a nice report that you can maybe give to subcontractors to show them how you got to their quantities. It will show you the bill item, the number, length, and area measurement next to that. Then the formula, how it was calculated using those measurements. And that is then also a very nice report. Then we have the plot drawing that I mentioned earlier. If I print that report, it will then print the specific drawing I had open with the active takeoff on that. So this report, together with that report that I showed you where you print the folders or the drawing, for example, you would then use that to discuss quantities with your client, for example. This is then the reports in QTO. So I'm going to close QTO. Next, we're going to look at our valuation reports. So first, I'll click on the printer. If I print my resource list, for example, I can then see, according to my valuation, how much I have used to date of my resources, how much is remaining, and what is my at completion. Then I can also print my value of my continuous valuation bill selling. This would then be what I could submit to my client for my monthly valuation, my interim payment claim. It has the bill items, the to date, the selling rates, etc. over there. These reports are all customizable. You can add your company logo to it, etc. Just due to time, I'm not going to show you that. So I'm just going to click on the button there to close all my documents. And then lastly, we're going to look at a trade totals display. So to do that, I'll click on the trade totals display. And you'll notice in valuation compared to estimating, you can base your trade totals on a lot more items. So for example, I can do a trade totals display on my actual quantity based on my net rates. Click on calculate. I will then see my items over there. Or I can base it on my selling rates using my claimed quantity, calculate there. Then I'll see how much I'm claiming to the client. I can also see that in the pie chart diagram at the top, and I can also view the percentage values over there, which is very nice. That is then the end of my valuation section. Next, we're going to look at Candy coding. So Candy coding, Candy allows you to control specific information such as categorizing your bills into specific trades or summarizing your resources into group and cost codes. When these codes are set up correctly, it will allow you to perform various analysis. These codes then are trade codes, price codes, cost codes, bill codes, VO codes, task codes, subcontractor codes, etc. So we are only going to focus on the codes that you need to use for cost and allowables, again, just due to time. So at Post Tender setup, you have then all these codes, and to do cost and allowables, you would have to have the two codes that are highlighted with the asterisks on this list. So we're going to only focus on the cost codes and the task codes. Now, firstly, what is cost and task codes? So cost codes are used to summarize resources to provide resource-based control for managing fixed resources such as material. So your cost code will refer to your accounting ledger code. So for example, you'll have 19 millimeters stone and crusher stone, and they'll both have the cost code stone allocated to them. So Candy can then tell you what are you going to spend on stone. Or your task codes are used to summarize bill items to manage time-related costs such as labor and plant. So this is a second code that you can use to make your information more accurate and do more analyses. And that is where you can allocate a task code or earthworks, for example, to all your earthworks items. And then we can give you analysis on those tasks. We can give you the task quantity, the derived rate, and the derived amount for that task. Using this information, then we can give you a report summarizing your resources into cost code level. So we can tell you on all your accounting ledger codes, what is the amount that you look at spending for this project. Or we can do a task code report. We will give you your accounting code labor and all the tasks below that to give you more detail to drill down into. We can then also do the demo in Candy. I'm going to switch to Candy, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my definitions and settings menu, and I'm going to click on my task codes, and you'll see my estimator has already put in the task codes for our company in here. And I'm going to go to 4.1, my cost codes, and the estimator has already put in the cost codes for this job. So as the QS is going to run this project on site and who's going to make sure, do the cost reports, etc., I just need to make sure that these codes have been allocated to the correct bill items. So I'll click on the document manager. I will then go to my resource list and go to my resource with cost and group code allocation. On the cost code column, I'll right click filter or blank codes, cost code symbols only. So cost codes should only be allocated to simple resources, and the reason for that is complex resources use a combination of simples and complex resources. So if you allocate a cost code to a complex resource that uses simple resources, you're simply going to double up your allowable. So that's why the filter looks for cost code simples only, and it's going to say no items found. So these items then have all cost codes allocated to them. Then I'm going to click on my document manager, go to valuation bills, and open my 2.6 task coding document. And I'm going to make sure the task codes are allocated to all bill items. So I'll right click on the task code column header, go to filter, unallocated task codes, and no items found. So I know this job is ready for cost reporting. Next, we're going to then go into cost and allowables, and we're going to do a cost report using Candy. So the cost and allowables application is used to monitor the financial performance of the project. The cost versus allowable to date can be viewed, the cost versus allowable remaining, and the cost versus allowable at completion. In Candy, we will then generate a cost report at management level. So this Excel cost report is supplied to our clients for free by RIB-CCS. And this cost report Excel then, if we zoom in a little bit, is then on management level. After you've done the cost and allowables analysis in Candy, you can export the information, and you can then see on your resource type, labor, plant, material, overheads, and subcontractor, for example, you can see the to-date allowable, the to-date cost, the variance. You can analyze how the project is doing. You'll also see the current value. We're going to look at that in a little bit. So the cost and allowables by period in Candy then will be a document that you view on screen, where you can drill down to a task and a cost code level. You can then see your to-date allowable and to-date costs, and then the variance between them. Then Candy will generate your remaining allowable and remaining cost, which I'll discuss a little bit later in more detail, and your at completion allowable and at completion cost over there. So let's go and generate this information in Candy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to cost and allowables and open up my 1.1 cost and allowables by period. So this document then, I'm just going to close all my headings and open it up first. I like seeing it on a cost and then task code level. Over here, I have my to date allowable. So the to date allowable is generated using the valuation that I just did. So if you don't do accurate valuations, you won't be able to do your cost and allowable reporting in Candy. So you have to do your valuations in Candy to view this information. And what this is telling me is on my accounting ledger code labor, I have used, according to my Candy quantities, 202570. If I open up that heading, I can then see what tasks contributed to that value. So next, I want to get my to-date cost in here. So your to-date cost needs to be imported. So what I'll do is I'll click on the document manager, open my cost import document. I'll then click on tools, import cost to date. So we have options to import from file or from build smart materials, and I can also import the sub liability. So I want to import my cost from a file, so I'll select that option. I'll then browse to my cost report file, a cost export that my accounting department gave me. So there's my cost import. Once I have the Excel selected, I'll click on start import. What I would then have to do is I need to identify the columns in Candy towards their relevant folder or columns in the Excel file. So once Candy is done reading the Excel file, I'll then be asked to identify the columns. So the first column is my cost codes. The second column is my task code, and then my imported real cost to date. So I just allocate those columns, and I don't want to import the headings that's in the Excel file. So I'm just going to ignore the first line there. Click on continue, click on OK, and now I have my cost imported. So I have my task codes and my cost code, and you'll notice they have descriptions even though I didn't import the descriptions. The reason for that is Candy aligns these codes with the codes from the imported file. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that these codes align with my Candy job. So I'll click on check import data, green tick, validation successful. So I know that these codes exist in my Candy job and they are correct. Then what I have is I have the adjustments columns. So these adjustments is then where I can do reallocations. So if you know of a cost that was captured incorrectly by your accounts department, just to make your cost report a bit more accurate, you can do reallocations. If you're aware of any accruals that's on site and that still needs to be captured, you can fill that in here. If you're aware of any sub liabilities, you can fill that in: materials, contract charges, others, and residual. And all this information will then be taken into account to generate your actual cost. You'll notice down here that these costs has then not been released for my cost report yet. So what I need to do is I need to click on tools, release cost for cost and allowables. And then if I go back to my cost and allowables by period and I click on calculate, my to date costs will then be imported, and I can then view this on a ledger code level, or I can drill down onto a task code level if I want to. So what I'll see here is my allowable was that amount, my cost was that amount. So this project is currently showing 119,090 loss according to the cost that I've imported and my allowable. Okay, so that is then how you would generate your to date allowable and cost. Next, we're going to look at how Candy calculates the remaining allowable and the remaining cost. So the remaining cost is calculated using a cost rate and a cost worksheet. So the resource cost rate and cost worksheet refers to a cost rate and cost worksheet that are used to make adjustments to the remaining cost duration for this project. Changes can be made to resource rates, productions, wastage, and construction methods. So what you could do is, for example, you could decide that you don't want to do the work yourself anymore, you're going to subcontract it, and that would then be a cost worksheet that you change the entire construction method. Okay, so let's go and have a look at how you adjust that. The remaining allowable, all that Candy does is it says your actual quantities that you filled in and your final quantities that we put in. Final less actual generates your remaining, and your remaining quantity times your net worksheet then generates your allowable remaining, and your cost remaining will then be your cost worksheet times your cost remaining your remaining quantity. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our document manager and we're going to open up our resource with cost rates to completion. And what we're going to go change is we're going to change our resource 25 MPA. So I'm going to close my resource list heading and I'm going to go to my material, my concrete material, and I'm going to go to my ready mix and my ready mix prices. Then my 25 MPA, I'm going to change the rates has increased from 1,200 to 1,300. And I'm going to change my 30 MPA to 1,450. So now that I've changed those cost rates, let's have a look at the effects it has on my cost reports. I'll click calculate, and you'll then notice my remaining cost has increased, and there's an additional variance now showing a loss of an additional 305,000. So if I close that, I can identify that that problem area is on my ready mix, which makes sense because I changed my ready mix rate, and I'm looking at completion at a very big loss there. So how can we then try and minimize this loss? So as a QS or a cost engineer, you would then try and make a plan to minimize this loss. And what you can then do is you can go to your bill with cost rates, and then on your to completion cost, what I normally do is I would sort this descending, because what this will do is it will immediately identify my high value bill items. So my 25 MPA concrete in slabs is my most expensive bill item with a 2.9 million rand value there. So if I click on my cost rate, double click there, that will open up my cost worksheet. So this is currently identical to my net worksheet. But what I can then do is I can go and change some items here to try and affect that or minimize that loss that we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a realistic change. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my site team said that they'll be able to achieve 15 cubes per hour instead of 12. And they're going to be able to lower their waste to 1.5% instead of 2%. I'll then store this worksheet, go back to my cost and allowables by period, click calculate, and I can then see the effects that that change had to my job. So it took that loss from 300 to 200,000. So this is then unfortunately my cost report. So what I'm going to then do is I'm going to export this to that Excel. So I'll go to my export cost report to Excel. I'll then double click on the Candy cost report export, click on OK, and it will then write this information to that Excel file. On this Excel, then I can view my previous, which this is the first valuation, so there's no previous information. My current, I can see that loss that I have currently. I can see my to date values, which is the same as my current at the moment. And then at the bottom, I can see my remaining and that huge loss that I'm looking at for my remaining, my at completion, and then also I can view what I had budgeted originally. And it also has a very nice summary page, which will show you on your resource types. It will show you your base, your final, and your variance, which you can then use for your cost report meeting. That is then the end of session 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marnus, and thank you to all our valued users who joined us for the seminar this week. We hope that it was insightful and that it will assist you in building best practices with Candy in 2021. We will be sending an email with the seminar recordings in the next few days. To close off the seminar, I'd like to end off with a short clip which showcases our cost management and enterprise accounting solution, BillSmart. When integrated with Candy, the two software products gives you a complete solution that manages the entire construction lifecycle from tender to final account. Please do not forget to complete the event survey that will land in your email inboxes shortly. And as always, please do not hesitate to reach out to us with your questions and queries. Operations keeps the lights on. Strategy provides a light at the end of the tunnel, but project management is the train engine that moves the organization forward. Thank you and goodbye.
Only the best is built on a rock-solid foundation, which is why RIB CCS developed unique, powerful construction and engineering software like BuildSmart, our game-changing enterprise accounting, procurement, and cost management solution for the built environment that enables businesses to excel in the digital age of construction. Developed by contractors for contractors, BuildSmart leverages years of industry experience, providing organizations with the tools to gain a competitive advantage. Visit ribccs.com and speak to us today. RIB CCS, the foundation of future success.
Build best practice with Candy in 2021. Thank you for joining us.